Welcome back. This is a place for quiet stories from the wizarding world, the paths Canon never walked, the choices that might have changed everything. Here we take a single moment and turn it slightly. We follow the consequences, slowly, carefully, year by year. If you enjoy these long, immersive journeys into alternate magic, consider subscribing and settling in. Now, let's start. Picture the canonical image, polished by a decade of Daily Prophet headlines and bedtime stories. A blasted roof, walls flayed open by ancient magic, ash drifting through the November air like slow snow. Inside a crib, a flash of green light, a single cry echoing through the silence as the Dark Lord falls and the legend of Harry Potter is born. In this timeline, that memory is already a lie, because there were two cries, not one. Halloween 1981. The cottage is a fortress cracked open from within, its wards shrieking in frequencies only unspeakables and dark lords can hear. Voldemort steps over James's body with methodical certainty, passes the fallen shape of Lily Potter, and enters the nursery prepared to end a prophecy. He sees a black-haired infant, yes, but also a second child. Smaller, swaddled in the same faded constellation-patterned blanket, sharing the same blood, the same soul resonance of sacrificial protection waiting to ignite. Canon insists the Dark Lord chose one target and one target only. Again, they are wrong. The greatest mistake of the age was not trusting Dumbledore's authority, nor fearing Voldemort's rise. It was accepting without question that Harry James Potter was the last Potter at all. From that single assumption, an entire war strategy, an entire mythology was constructed. Every Auror deployment, every Order meeting, every whispered calculation in the halls of power premised on the comforting fiction of a solitary chosen one. In reality, the prophecy never promised singularity. Born as the seventh month dies does not specify one crib. Lily's blood did not know how to sacrifice itself for only half her children. In this Slytherin timeline of secrets and omissions, there is a sister, call her Evelyn, for whom the world made no nursery rhyme, no chocolate frog card, no commemorative tapestry square. She exists in the negative space of history, a weapon being polished in the dark by omission rather than by wand. Her name is stripped from hospital records, her birth unregistered with the ministry, her presence excised from every surviving photograph of Godric's Hollow, with the same tactically lethal precision used to erase Death Eaters from family trees. Harry becomes the boy who lived. She becomes the girl no one is allowed to remember. From that erasure, every familiar event begins to warp. The cupboard under the stairs is no longer a solitary cell, but a compressed world of two half-starved children, where Harry's resilience is not forged in isolation, but in the relentless arithmetic of shared hunger and divided blame. The Sorting Hat no longer weighs a single mind, but a pair of intertwined trajectories that could shatter house politics. The Chamber of Secrets, the Graveyard Resurrection, even the Battle of Hogwarts itself, all of them begin to look less like fixed points and more like experiments with missing variables. Because if the prophecy's power to vanquish the Dark Lord was never meant for one child alone, what happens when fate is forced to split its charge? What happens when the magic that should have crystallized in a single legend is bifurcated between siblings? When one is elevated as a savior and the other is buried alive in silence? Today we excavate the other Potter, and once she steps into the light, the war you thought you knew will not survive the introduction. Two Cries in Godric's Hollow. Redrawing Halloween 1981. The Wizarding World tells itself a simple story about that Halloween. One house, one Dark Lord, one crying child. They are wrong. In this timeline, October 31st, 1981 fractures along a quieter axis. At 11:58 p.m., Lily Potter's first newborn draws breath. Hazel Euphemia Potter, dark-eyed, furious, announced to the world with a raw, indignant wail. 7 minutes later, as the storm thickens over Godric's Hollow and the cottage wards hum like a trapped wasp, her brother follows, Harry James Potter, second by minutes, already living in someone else's shadow. The prophecy Sybil Trelawney spat into existence months earlier does not care about minutes. Born as the 7th month dies is not a scalpel. It is a net. Two children of those who have thrice defied Voldemort, both arriving at the dying edge of July, both blood of Lily's sacrificial line. The Order, desperate for a narrative, condenses this into a single savior. Destiny, allegedly, has chosen a boy. Again, they are wrong. Voldemort does not know this when he tears through the Fidelius that night. He believes, with methodical certainty, that he is hunting one infant. The cottage becomes a brief fortress of resistance, James falling in the hall, Lily in the nursery. But the real shock comes when he steps over Lily's body and finds not a solitary cradle, but two small breathing hypotheses of his destruction wrapped in identical starlight. For a mind like Tom Riddle's, this is not awe, it is a calculation. The prophecy speaks of the one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord, but power is an elastic term. Magical potency, emotional leverage, soul resonance. Hazel's eyes, already locked on him with unnerving focus, suggest a mind that will question, dissect, weaponize. Harry, reaching blindly toward Lily's cooling hand, offers a different danger. The capacity to love so fiercely that sacrifice becomes an inexhaustible arsenal. He cannot mark them both. Even Voldemort, drunk on his own legend, senses that splitting the curse, dividing the myth, risks creating not a single nemesis, but a mirrored pair. Two anchors for a prophecy that might learn to cooperate with itself. So he chooses, with the coldness of a duelist picking terrain. He marks the child whose name he has heard whispered most often, in fear and hope. Harry. The killing curse slams into the boy, rebounds, and detonates the Dark Lord's body. But in that instant, something else happens. Something no one in that room understands. The magic does not merely strike and return, it ricochets between the twins. A violent circuit. Hazel's scream is not just grief, it is echo, the bond between them, a latent phenomenon the unspeakables would one day call mirror blood, flares into existence. A shared resonance where damage to one leaves an invisible scar on the other. When Dumbledore arrives at the smoking ruin, he does not find a clean legend. He finds an equation with too many variables. Harry, marked and miraculously alive, already a symbol, already a weapon being polished in the dark by the world's expectations. Hazel, unmarked, but trembling with residual curse energy, an unquantified anomaly that could destabilize every plan he has assembled since hearing the prophecy. In the Slytherin timeline of Dumbledore's mind, one child is a masterpiece to be molded. Two are a problem. One can be guided, nudged towards sacrifice at the appointed hour. Two might choose each other instead of the greater good. So as Hagrid lifts Harry from the wreckage, Dumbledore's gaze lingers on Hazel a fraction too long. The war did not end in Godric's Hollow that night. It merely acquired a second center of gravity, and the decision he makes about where to send each twin will determine which of them the world remembers and which of them learns to operate in the dark. The sister the world never met. Dumbledore's quiet crime. Dumbledore does not hesitate. He sequences. On the rubble-strewn street of Godric's Hollow, he divides the future with the same methodical certainty he once applied to Grindelwald's defeat. One child for the narrative the world expects, one child for the contingency it must never suspect. In this timeline, Lily's protection has flared wide enough to catch both twins, but the magic has chosen to manifest asymmetrically. Harry with the familiar lightning bolt scar, Hazel with something quieter, deeper, a soul resonance that leaves no mark on skin at all. He tests it without wands or instruments. Harry whimpers when Voldemort's name is spoken. Hazel stills, eyes unfocused, as if listening for an echo only she can hear. Two centers of gravity, two possible fulfillments of a prophecy that never specified a singleton. For a strategist who has already watched one war spiral beyond his control, the conclusion forms quickly. One symbol is dangerous. Two are tactically lethal. So the public story is written before sunrise. Hagrid carries Harry to Privet Drive, to the Dursleys and their neat hedges and weaponized normality, while the Order believes, with almost devotional certainty, that the boy who lived is singular. They are wrong. In the same night's cold hours, under no phoenix-lit ceremony, a second plan unfolds. A discreet Muggle couple in a different county, chosen for their obscurity and their lack of magical ties, receives a foundling girl with no forwarding history and no surviving kin. Her name on the forged documents is Iris Evans. Dumbledore tells himself this is mercy. Split the twins and you split the target profile. No Death Eater remnant will think to look for a second Potter when every Prophet headline screams about the first. The wizarding world, still reeling, wants a single, clean miracle. He gives it to them. Harry becomes the visible relic of Lily's sacrifice. Iris is a masterpiece to be molded by absence, by silence, by an upbringing that owes nothing to wands or war. The cover-up is not improvised. It is bureaucratically elegant. At the ministry, the magical birth registry accepts only one Potter entry that night. The clerk on duty remembers a flicker in the ink, a double ghost of letters that vanishes when he blinks. The Daily Prophet runs its triumphant front page. Babby defeats you. Now who? With a single name and a grainy photograph. No editor ever sees the alternate layout with twins in the headline. The galley proofs simply never arrive. Even Hogwarts is bent around the lie. Deep in the castle's stone heart, the Book of Admittance should inscribe both children the moment Lily's blood seals their protection. Instead, a thin, silvery hand, magic channeled through Headmaster's authority, halts the quill mid-curve. Harry James Potter flows in cleanly. The second line stutters, ink beading like hesitation, then sinks back into the page as if swallowed by the fortress itself. Years later, a faint, belated entry will try to surface under a different surname. For now, Iris exists in the negative space of records and memories, a weapon being polished in the dark not by design, but by neglect. This is Dumbledore's quiet crime. The war's greatest strategist does not kill a child. He deletes her, creating a living ghost whose erasure will haunt every alliance, every prophecy, every calculated move that follows in the Slytherin timeline. 2 cupboards, 2 childhoods. How a sister rewrites the Dursley years. Harry grows up in a cupboard, but in this timeline his isolation is not clean, not absolute. It is contaminated by memory. The wizarding world will later insist he was a blank slate, a boy with no past and no attachments. They are wrong. From the age of 4, the dreams begin, not of flying motorbikes or green light, but of a girl with his eyes, laughing in a kitchen he does not recognize, reaching for him with jam-sticky fingers before the scene fractures into white noise. By morning, all that survives is the ache and a syllable that refuses to settle into a name. The Dursleys call it imagination. Harry, even then, recognizes it as a wound. This phantom sister does not cure his loneliness, it reframes it. The cupboard under the stairs becomes less a prison and more a mausoleum for a relationship he cannot access. The silence around her more dangerous than Vernon's shouting. Petunia flinches too hard when he asks if he was ever a twin, if there was ever another baby. Dudley snickers. The conversation dies, but the resonance does not. Every non-answer is proof that the adults are hiding more than just the word magic. That half-remembered presence alters the geometry of his defiance. Canon Harry rebels because he has a stubborn core of self-respect. In this timeline, that core is braided with obligation. When he endures Dudley's fists without crying, when he hoards stolen library books and secret questions, it is not only for himself. It is for the unnamed other half he is increasingly certain exists somewhere beyond Privet Drive. Escape stops being an abstract hope and hardens into a private vow. If he ever gets out, he will find the person the war and Dumbledore deleted. Meanwhile, Iris grows in a different cupboard entirely. Not the crude hostility of the Dursleys, but a house that is impeccably tidy, impeccably polite, and emotionally glacial. Her guardians feed her, clothe her, praise her grades with the same tone they use for a well-functioning appliance. Affection is transactional, granted when she performs, withdrawn when she questions. Neglect here is not loud. It is methodical certainty. In that environment, rebellion is inefficient. Calculation is safe. Iris learns to measure faces, to test every adult with small, controlled risks before granting even provisional trust. Where Harry believes in people he has not met yet, she trusts no one she has not already broken down and mapped. Two children, same wound, opposite conclusions. Their separation expresses itself in magic, long before either knows the word. Harry's worst accidental surges come not in direct response to abuse, but in those thin moments before sleep, when he is staring at the spider-webbed ceiling and thinking, with bone-deep conviction, that someone is missing. Light bulbs pop, locks slide open. The air vibrates with an unnamed soul resonance that makes Petunia's skin crawl. Iris, by contrast, never blows up a classroom. Her magic coils inward, manifesting as instinctive wards, doors that teachers somehow forget to open, floorboards that never creak when she moves at night, a perimeter of secrets around her bed like a child-sized fortress. Neither has language for this bond, but their bodies behave as if the other exists. Harry collects questions. Iris collects contingencies. One becomes a boy whose power is anchored in faith in the unseen. The other, a girl being shaped into a weapon being polished in the dark by absence, not allegiance, already tactically lethal in her suspicions. The tragedy is simple. They are being prepared for war against the same enemy, and, if Dumbledore's gamble fails, against each other, without ever being allowed to know the face that should have been their first ally. The letter that shouldn't exist. Hogwarts notices the missing Potter. Magic notices what men try to bury. It writes in ink, older than any war, on parchment that does not forget. On the night Godric's hollow burned in this timeline, two names bled themselves onto a page that has never known hesitation. In the high, dustless silence of Hogwarts' most secret chamber, the quill of acceptance lifted, trembled once over the waiting parchment, and wrote with methodical certainty, Harry James Potter. The line glowed, fixed, a prophecy in script. Then, without pause, the quill dipped again, as if following an echo of soul resonance through the dark. Iris Eileen Potter. 2 entries, 1 destiny, doubled. The Book of Admittance is not sentimental. It does not care for Dumbledore's designs or Voldemort's fears. Its only question is brutally simple. Will this child survive long enough to wield magic? On that night, the answer for both Potters was yes. What Dumbledore attempts in the aftermath is not erasure but concealment, a bureaucrat's solution applied to an artifact that predates bureaucracy itself. Quietly, obsessively, he builds a fortress of obfuscation around Iris. Wards layered over the Dursley home that twist the perception of any magical scrying. Charms that smear her magical signature into Harry's like wet ink. Complex runic veils keyed to her blood so that any automated Hogwarts process slips past her. In theory, Iris becomes an administrative ghost, present in the world, absent on every list that matters. In theory, the flaw is structural. The quill does not read current signatures, it follows the original contract of birth. For 10 years, the mismatch between Dumbledore's interference and the book's ancient authority builds like pressure behind a dam. Letters to wizarding children are a rote ritual, a mechanical kindness. Yet in this timeline, the ritual misfires. July 1991. In the owlery, rolls of parchment unfurl with the usual mechanical grace, addresses inscribing themselves in green ink. One letter for Mr. Harry Potter, the cupboard, under the stairs. And then, like a stutter in reality, a second envelope pulls itself from the pile, ink hesitating, then committing. Miss Iris Potter, smallest bedroom, 4 Privet Drive. The system has decided it is done being edited. Minerva McGonagall is the first to notice the anomaly. She has checked these letters for decades with a brisk, unromantic efficiency. There is no romance in duplicate entries. There is only danger. She reads the second name once, twice, and the world tilts. The Potters are dead. Harry is alone. They are wrong. The confrontation in Dumbledore's office is conducted in low voices, but it has the temperature of open war. Minerva places the second letter on his desk as though it were evidence in a trial. She does not sit. Her questions are precise, scalpel sharp. When was she born? Where has she been? Why was no one told? Dumbledore, who has out-talked ministers and Death Eaters alike, cannot talk around handwriting he did not control. He admits it. There was always another Potter. He hid her from everyone, including Harry, because 2 children fitting the same prophecy line made the board too volatile. One weapon being polished in the dark was, in his calculus, dangerous enough. A second, unmonitored, threatened to break the Slytherin timeline before it began. The pattern interrupt is brutal. The headmaster who governs secrets discovers a limit. Hogwarts itself has chosen to remember Iris. The letter in McGonagall's hand is not an invitation. It is a summons. In that moment, Dumbledore recalculates. The wards that once felt protective now look like shackles. If the book has pushed back, others will follow. Ministry registries, trace charms, even the whisper networks of pure blood society. Keeping Iris hidden may now be more dangerous than letting her walk into the castle's gaze. The heart of the magical world is waking up, and the missing Potter, dragged into the open by ink and ancient lore, is about to step through the front doors of the only institution Dumbledore cannot fully lie to. 2 tickets to the Wizarding World, Diagon Alley in split screen. The heart of the magical world is waking up, and it does not wake gently. It opens like a vault door under siege, hinges screaming, light flooding into places that have survived on silence. On one side of that door stands a boy who has been starved of every answer. On the other, a girl who has been fed only carefully measured lies. We begin, as the canon does, with a knock that is not a knock at all, but an assault. The shack on the rock, the storm, the giant who bends the door out of its frame rather than wait for permission. Hagrid's arrival in this timeline is more than spectacle. It is a declaration of jurisdiction. When he calls Harry a wizard, the word does not land as a miracle. It lands as diagnosis. Harry, who has spent a decade feeling half-finished, cataloguing every flicker of accidental magic as evidence of some unnamed defect. Suddenly hears a category that might explain the missing piece he has never been allowed to name. The world will later insist that this was the moment he became the boy who lived in his own mind. They are wrong. This is the moment he realizes that the Dursleys' hatred has a grammar. Across the map, the second knock is almost polite. A brass knocker, a measured rhythm, a woman in emerald robes whose presence makes the hallway feel narrower by sheer authority. McGonagall does not bend doors. She waits for them to be opened. Iris meets her recruiter, not as a rescuer, but as an inspector. The Ministry's directive is clear. Confirm the magic, deliver the letter, reveal as little as possible about the Potter line, and nothing about the brother who survived the war. In this tidy suburban sitting room, the lies are not screamed like Vernon's rants. They are curated omissions. A masterpiece of omission is still a masterpiece. Diagon Alley becomes their shared initiation, staged like a split screen the world will never see. Harry steps through the brick archway with Hagrid at his shoulder, and his senses flayed open. Gringotts is all gleam and terror. Goblins are living proof that adults have lied to him about everything that matters. He stares up, memorizing nothing, overwhelmed by the revelation that the world is bigger, stranger, and, crucially, wants something from him. Iris walks the same marble hall with a different gait. She counts guards, doors, sightlines, the way wands twitch when a witch raises her voice. Where Harry is dazzled, she is mapping a fortress. In this timeline, the same corridor manufactures wonder in one child and a tactically lethal caution in the other. Ollivander's is where the soul resonance stops being metaphor. Harry's wand chooses him with a warmth that feels like a hand closing around his, a quiet homecoming that settles the static in his bones. The phoenix feather's flare is bright but contained, as if the wood has been waiting with patient, methodical certainty. Iris's match is not patient. Her wand answers like a pulled alarm, sharp, volatile, a crack of power that rattles boxes on distant shelves and makes Ollivander's eyes widen with a recognition he does not voice. The twin resonance has not duplicated destiny. It has divided it, sharding the prophecy's promise between steady flame and sudden detonation. Both leave diagonally, carrying more than books and robes. Harry clutches his first birthday cake and an owl, feeling a gravitational pull toward Hogwarts. He cannot articulate, only obey. Iris fingers the grain of her wand and the fresh weight of galleons, sensing that the adults have constructed a narrative around her that does not quite fit. Each walks away armed with questions that will define them. Who am I to this war? And what has been taken from me to make me fit that role? The train will not be kind to those questions, but it will put the Potters on a collision course. Sorting the twins, Gryffindor, Slytherin, and a house divided. The train delivers them not into safety, but into ceremony, into the polished theatre of the Great Hall, where the ceiling mirrors an uncaring sky and the candles burn like patient witnesses. The world believes it understands what will happen here. The boy who lived will be paraded, applauded, and placed where Gryffindors go to become legends. They are wrong. When Potter Harry is called, the hum in the hall spikes, then collapses into a brittle silence. He walks forward with the hesitance of a child who has learned that attention is usually a prelude to pain, Iris watching from the queue like a tether pulled tight. The hat drops over his eyes, and in this timeline, the conversation does not unfold in private comfort. It becomes an autopsy. Ambition, whispers the hat, tasting the scar and the scar beneath the scar. Hunger. A mind that has learned to endure, to calculate, to survive in a cupboard fortress with only a sister as counterweight. Slytherin could make you a weapon. Gryffindor could make you a banner. It pauses, feeling a faint, dissonant pull, as if the magic it is reading is incomplete, a chord missing its second note. There is another. It realizes with methodical certainty. It has tasted this resonance already. Soul resonance, split at birth and braided by war. The hat hesitates, glimpsing not houses, but trajectories, not colours, but campaigns. Harry begs, as in canon, not Slytherin, and the hat, already wary of what a tactically lethal Slytherin Potter might become, snaps the decision shut. Gryffindor. The hall explodes on cue. Red and gold swallow him. Ron, thumping his back with unstudied relief. Hermione, clapping with the precise enthusiasm of someone who has read about this moment and is relieved to find the world briefly matching the page. Across the room, the Slytherin table watches with narrowed eyes, already calculating the implications. Then McGonagall calls, "Potter, Iris." The air does not merely hush, it recoils. A second Potter, a second late July child of Lily and James. The hat is on her head before the whispers can fully form, and this time, it does not meander. Here is the missing note, sharp where Harry is soft, coiled where he is open, the same core of reckless loyalty refracted through a colder, more analytical lens. This one, the hat thinks, is not merely surviving the dark. She is a masterpiece to be molded by it. Gryffindor would blunt her. Slytherin will sharpen. Slytherin. The word hits the hall like a curse. The boy who lived in scarlet, his twin in green. Two halves of a prophecy placed on opposite sides of the aisle. A living diagram of the war that built them. At the Gryffindor table, Ron mutters about bad luck. Hermione's eyes are already tracking Iris, revising mental maps of how power moves through this castle. At the Slytherin table, Draco Malfoy straightens, interest ignited, not in Harry, but in the sister the world did not script. Snape's gaze fixes on Iris with an intensity that is almost hunger. Lily's eyes, Slytherin's colours. A Potter he might yet influence. In this timeline, his first meaningful investment is not in a boy under a red banner, but in the girl whose existence destabilizes the board. Harry's nights in the Gryffindor common room become negotiations with absence. Every joke with Ron, every strategy session with Hermione is haunted by the green and silver echo across the hall. The other Potter laughing at a different table, absorbing a different language of loyalty and authority. Iris, meanwhile, is courted subtly by Snape, flamboyantly by Draco, cautiously by older Slytherins who recognize a weapon being polished in the dark. The Sorting Hat, back on its shelf, does not sleep. It has cleaved a prophecy, weaponized a family, and turned sibling bond into institutional fault line. House points, Quidditch cups, childish rivalries. These are surface games. Beneath them, something older is waking, and the hat can feel the board shifting toward a confrontation it has accidentally accelerated. It wonders, with something like dread, which Potter will move first when the war finally arrives at Hogwarts' doors, and which one will decide what survives the fire. Rewriting Year 1, the Philosopher's Stone with two Potters. The first year at Hogwarts does not bend around a single lonely boy in glasses. In this timeline, it orbits a binary star system, two Potters exerting opposing gravitational pulls on every corridor, classroom, and quiet conspiracy. Canon assumes the golden trio crystallizes by narrative inevitability, as if friendship were a law of magic. They are wrong. Here, the formation of alliances is a contested process, a slow negotiation conducted under the watchful gaze of portraits and professors. Harry, Ron, and Hermione still find each other over shared danger and mutual irritation. Yet the presence of Iris in Slytherin turns their neat triangle into an unstable quadrilateral, each point tugging loyalty in a different direction. Hermione, who in the original timeline learns to navigate Ron's jealousy and Harry's reluctant fame, now discovers a more formidable obstacle. Iris's sharp, skeptical intellect operating from across the house divide. Every time Hermione corrects Ron's spell work or challenges Harry's assumptions, she hears, via corridor gossip, that Iris has already dissected the same lesson in the Slytherin common room. More clinically, more ruthlessly, with a tactically lethal clarity. The rivalry is academic at first, then ideological, a silent duel over who will become Harry's true interpreter of the magical world. Meanwhile, Iris is quietly cataloguing what Harry misses. Snape's apparent hostility becomes, in her eyes, a pattern with methodical certainty. His anger spikes when Harry is careless, but his questions probe Iris's control, her occlumency potential, her capacity to be a weapon being polished in the dark rather than a reckless Gryffindor spectacle. Quirrell's nervousness, which Harry reads as comic ineptitude, resolves for Iris into an off-key resonance. Fear without a clear object, the tremor of a man sharing his body with something older. And above them all, Dumbledore's gaze lingers not on one boy, but on the pair, as if measuring soul resonance, as if each Potter were a masterpiece to be moulded toward a different strategic end. The Halloween troll incident becomes the first public proof that the board has changed. While Harry and Ron blunder toward the girl in the bathroom, Iris receives different whispers in the Slytherin dungeon. A troll in the dungeons, younger students panicking, prefects hesitating. She does not race toward Gryffindor danger. She fortifies her own house. Dragging a terrified second year behind her, she calculates routes, uses simple spells with brutal efficiency, and when cornered, distracts the troll long enough for Snape and the staff to arrive. Draco watches, expecting cowardice, and finding instead controlled defiance. His sneer fractures into grudging respect. Snape's attention sharpens. A second Potter who protects Slytherins is an anomaly he cannot ignore. When the Philosopher's Stone enters the narrative, Harry stumbles toward the truth through overheard conversations, and Hagrid slips. Iris, however, approaches it as a structural problem. Gringotts is breached, something is moved to Hogwarts, and suddenly the third-floor corridor is forbidden. She pieces together that an object of power is being hidden, but inverts the threat model. In her analysis, Dumbledore is not defending the school from an external attacker. He is baiting one, using Hogwarts as a fortress, and its children as unknowing hostages. So while Harry suspects Snape of hunting the stone, Iris concludes that someone inside the staff is moving against Dumbledore's authority, and that the headmaster is allowing it to flush out deeper enemies. In the Slytherin timeline, this is the seed of her mistrust. Not that danger exists, but that it is curated. The climax diverges quietly but decisively. Harry, Ron, and Hermione still breach the gauntlet. The chessboard still falls. The flames still part. Iris moves too, following a parallel trail of clues, but is intercepted. Not by accident. A prefect is ordered to detain her. A corridor collapses under a conveniently misfired spell. Snape materializes with a command that brooks no disobedience. By the time she fights free of the net, Quirrell has already burned, and Voldemort has already fled. In the hospital wing aftermath, Iris listens as Dumbledore explains everything to Harry and almost nothing to her. The omission is surgical. She realizes, with a cold clarity that will define the coming years, that the headmaster chose which Potter would face the Dark Lord and which would be kept in reserve. One is the visible champion. The other is the contingency plan. War, she understands, has already come to Hogwarts. The first year was simply its rehearsal. Year 2, the chamber opens and the wrong Potter answers. Year 2 does not begin with a monster. It begins with a book. In this timeline, the diary does not fall cleanly into Ginny Weasley's trembling hands and stay there. It moves like a cursed coin through the school economy. And its first true anchor is not a lonely redhead, but the girl the war forgot to name. Iris Potter arrives back at Hogwarts as Slytherin's resident paradox. Publicly, the boy who lived's twin. Privately, a contingency the headmaster still refuses to explain. Isolation is a methodical certainty. The Slytherin common room, with its green-lit water shadows and stone vaulting, feels less like a house and more like a fortress where she is both guest and prisoner. Whispers follow her that she is the spare, the failed prophecy, a weapon being polished in the dark and then left sheathed. When the diary appears in her school bag after a jostled corridor and a muttered apology from a second-hand robed Ginny, Iris does not scream. She studies it. Tom Riddle, on the other side of the ink, studies back. At first, his strategy is familiar: sympathetic questions, carefully rationed understanding, the slow construction of intimacy. But the moment Iris writes, almost idly, that her twin sees Dumbledore as a savior, while she sees only a man of omissions, something in the soul resonance between diary and girl shifts. Two Potters, two viable readings of a prophecy he only half remembers. The world believes there is one focal point of destiny in this war. They are wrong. Riddle adapts with predatory grace. He stops asking about school gossip and starts asking about the night in Godric's Hollow, about the years with the Dursleys, about which lies Dumbledore chose to tell Harry and which silences he reserved for her. Iris, hungry for answers that no adult will give, begins to pour herself into the pages. In return, Tom offers not just comfort, but ideology. That power belongs to those who were denied it first. That authority hoards narratives the way dragons hoard gold. That she is not a mistake, but a masterpiece to be molded. The attacks, when they begin, are not the broad, almost impersonal purges of canon. In this timeline, the pattern is jagged and intimate. Filch's cat, guardian of corridors where Harry once served detentions for heroics, Iris was excluded from. Colin Creevey, whose photographs have been quietly cropping Iris out of frames to center the boy who lived. Even a near miss on Justin Finch Fletchley, whose muggle-born status has made him an object lesson in Dumbledore's rhetoric about chosen families. Each target is a mirror of how the Potter's story has been curated, and Tom narrates these incidents to Iris as if they are proofs in a theorem about betrayal. The pattern interrupt arrives as panic. Ginny begins to fade. Ink on Iris's pages grows sluggish, then frantic, as if Tom is dividing his attention between two investments. Iris notices the tremor in the younger girl's hands at breakfast, the way she flinches from the diary now clutched too tightly. Recognition comes late, like a curse breaking 1 second after impact. She understands that her own vulnerability, her own anger at Dumbledore, has been the test case for a more pliable host. When the chamber finally opens in full and Ginny is taken, Iris does not run to the headmaster. She runs with Harry. Yet the loyalties are not clean. In the underground cathedral of Slytherin Stone, as Harry faces the 16-year-old memory of Tom Riddle, Iris stands half a step behind, seeing not just the boy who tried to kill them, but the mentor who almost succeeded in turning her into his emissary. Riddle speaks Harry's name with theatrical contempt. But when his gaze slides to Iris, the calculation is different. Curious, acquisitive, almost reverent. He has already begun, in the quiet algebra of his mind, to write a second prophecy, one not about the boy who lived, but about the girl he could turn. The basilisk moves in the dark, but the real predator here is an idea. Harry thinks he is closing a chamber. He is wrong. He has just opened a new front in the war. Off-screen wars, how two Potters reshape the wizarding chessboard. From the moment the chamber seals behind them, the war stops being local. It stops being about a school year, a monster, a diary. In this timeline, the presence of two Potters begins to rewire the entire chessboard with methodical certainty, one academic year at a time. 1993 becomes the year the past refuses to stay buried. Sirius Black does not escape Azkaban for a single godson, a lone heir to James and Lily. He breaks out for a bloodline. Every whispered report of Potter in the corridors is now ambiguous. Every glimpse of messy hair or green eyes could belong to either child, and his mission fractures: rescue Harry from Dumbledore's half-truths, and reach Iris before Slytherin and Snape finish forging her into a weapon being polished in the dark. The Shrieking Shack confrontation is no longer an intimate revelation. It is a custody battle over an entire future faction. By 1994, the world stops pretending this is coincidence. The Triwizard Tournament, already a spectacle of controlled danger, mutates into a referendum on prophecy. Harry's forced entry into the games is still scandalous, but the whisper under every Daily Prophet headline is quieter and sharper. If the Dark Lord marked him, why does his sister's magic feel like a mirror held at a different angle? When Iris appears in the stands, flanked by Slytherins who move around her with the deference reserved for authority, foreign delegations take note. Durmstrang's headmaster watches her, not Harry, calculating what a second Potter, fluent in serpents and house politics, would be worth in a coming war. Inside Hogwarts, Iris's presence in Slytherin does not dissolve hostility. It redistributes it. Some blood purists, faced with a Potter in their own house, moderate their open cruelty in the corridors, unwilling to be seen undermining a potential savior. Others double down in private, furious that their ancestral fortress is being colonized by a Gryffindor surname. Draco Malfoy, caught between family ideology and the daily reality of sharing a common room with Iris, stops being a cartoon bully and starts behaving like a junior statesman. He understands, with a precocity that unnerves even Snape, that choosing which Potter to orbit could define not only his life, but the Malfoy name. The institutions respond with the graceless panic of old empires confronted with new variables. Deep In the Department of Mysteries, the Ministry quietly commissions fresh prophecy attempts, dragging half-broken seers into alpine safe houses and demanding clarification on the one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord. They are wrong. There is no singular one anymore, only a soul resonance split across two children who refuse to align neatly with anyone's script. Within the Order, the debate turns poisonous. To some, Iris is an asset, a second blade raised by Hogwarts itself. To others, a liability whose Slytherin loyalties could flip the entire war if Voldemort reaches her first. When the graveyard ritual finally occurs, Voldemort returns to a world he has already mapped with tactically lethal precision. He does not simply intend to kill Harry and resume the old campaign. He wants to capture Iris, to corrupt the Slytherin timeline from within by breaking the Potter who speaks his house's language. Every rescue plan, every ward around Hogwarts, every whispered argument in Grimmauld Place now includes a second name. With each passing year, the question ceases to be whether the twins will stand on opposite sides of the coming conflict. The only question that remains is how many bodies the world will stack between them before that line is finally irrevocably drawn, and which side will dare to ask one Potter to sacrifice the other. That decision is closer than anyone in this timeline realizes. The prophecy breaks. Who is the chosen one when there are two? That decision is closer than anyone in this timeline realizes, because the prophecy everyone thinks they understand was never designed to hold two beating hearts. The sentence that once seemed so clean, the one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord, approaches, fractures under the pressure of twin existence, each clause becoming a blade that can point in more than one direction. Dumbledore returns to the wording with almost ritualistic precision. Born as the 7th month dies, and the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal. In public, his methodical certainty never wavers. Harry was marked. Harry is the axis around which this war must turn. In private, confronted with Iris's scarless forehead and the eerie soul resonance that hums between them, even he feels the ground tilt. The language of the One becomes embarrassingly inadequate when the magic itself keeps refusing to choose. Voldemort, who once believed the prophecy named a single rival to be extinguished, adapts faster. He has lived as fragments. The idea that power might be distributed is not theoretical, it is biography. In this Slytherin timeline, his theory evolves into something tactically lethal. Harry as the visible variable, Iris as the hidden coefficient. If the power to vanquish is shared, if their combined existence is the true threat, then the war is no longer about killing a child, but about breaking a circuit. Inside that circuit, the twins suffer in opposite directions. Harry, paraded by the world as its designated savior, develops a survivor's guilt that is not about death, but about selection. He is the public twin, the one adults look at when they say chosen, and every headline that omits Iris feels like an accusation. Iris, watching him, turned into a symbol while she is quietly redirected, protected, or weaponized depending on the day, begins to suspect a cruelty the prophecy never voiced, that she might exist only as a spare organ for fate, a masterpiece to be molded and then harvested if Harry fails. The line that terrifies her most is not the one everyone quotes. "Neither can live while the other survives" is usually read as an iron bar locking Harry and Voldemort into mutual destruction. Iris, reading alone in the hush of the library, notices the pronoun drift. The prophecy never names the other. What if the other is not the Dark Lord at all, but the sibling whose existence destabilizes the equation? What if only one Potter is allowed to walk away from the final war intact? From that darker reading flows a new, unspoken war plan on every side. Dumbledore calculates scenarios where one twin must be preserved as the vessel of hope. Voldemort toys with the idea of forcing Harry to kill Iris to prove the prophecy wrong. Even well-meaning Order members start to talk in lowered voices about acceptable sacrifices, about which child the world can least afford to lose. The prophecy ceases to be a riddle about Voldemort and becomes a quiet referendum on which life is more politically valuable. And beneath it all, a different possibility flickers, dangerous precisely because it is hopeful. What if the prophecy is not a script, but a weapon? One the twins can finally turn back on the adults who have used its words to justify every lie, every omission, every calculated abandonment. The next move will not be decided in a dusty office or a Death Eater council, but in the moment Harry and Iris choose whether to play their assigned roles or to rewrite the war around their refusal. Order, Ministry, and Malfoys. The politics of choosing a Potter. The moment the twins begin to question the prophecy, the adults stop seeing them as children and start seeing them as leverage. In this timeline, every conversation about Harry and Iris becomes a negotiation, every gesture of protection a down payment on future obedience. Neutrality dies in the same breath as their innocence. In the shadowed kitchen of Grimmauld Place, the Order of the Phoenix fractures along a hairline no one wants to name. Molly Weasley insists Iris must be shielded from all this, by which she means strategy, secrets, and the Slytherin common room. Mad-Eye Moody, scarred by too many lost assets, argues the opposite. Bring Iris fully into the fold, train her, lock her into their side with knowledge and necessity. They are both operating under a sentimental illusion that proximity equals loyalty. They are wrong. It is Kingsley who articulates the fear everyone is circling. Iris has friends in Slytherin, a seat in a house that produced more Death Eaters than Aurors, and a temperament that actually listens when Snape speaks. If Voldemort can reach her through that web, through Draco, through Slughorn, through sheer house resonance, then the Order may be grooming a weapon for the wrong master. The room falls into a brittle silence, because the logic is sound and no one wants to say aloud what it implies. One Potter might have to be sacrificed to secure the other. At the Ministry, the calculation is colder, wrapped in press conferences and smiling photographs. Fudge, desperate to maintain the illusion of control, parades Harry as the reluctant poster boy of institutional stability, the boy who trusts the ministry's wisdom. Iris, by contrast, is treated as a dangerous unknown, too Slytherin to be wholesome, too Potter to be ignored. Her visible presence beside Fudge would legitimize his narrative. Her refusal would expose the lie. When Scrimgeour replaces him, the strategy hardens. He offers Iris internships, quiet access to Auror files, the flattering promise of real authority. Harry is the statue in the atrium. Iris is the swing vote in a war cabinet he cannot openly convene. Inside Malfoy Manor, the politics narrow to a single, tactically lethal question. What is Iris Potter worth compared to Voldemort's patience? Lucius, stripped of much of his former influence, sees in Iris not a schoolgirl, but a masterpiece to be molded, a potential second chosen one whose sole resonance with Harry could be redirected. Aligning Draco with her study partners, shared detentions, carefully staged rescues, might rebuild the Malfoy name as indispensable to whichever Potter wins. Yet every gesture that centers Iris risks being read as centering someone other than the Dark Lord. In the Slytherin timeline of Lucius's private fears, that miscalculation ends with his family on the floor, not the drawing room wall. Snape stands at the junction of all these currents, a man bound by a dead woman's eyes twice over. Protect Lily's child had always been a singular vow. Now, it is a divided obligation. Harry, in Gryffindor, is the visible battlefield. Public detentions, calculated cruelty, a shield of hatred that keeps other predators at bay. Iris, in his own house, is a quieter war. He must grade her essays, monitor her alliances, decide when to crush her ambition and when to sharpen it. Every point he awards or deducts is a move in a game no one else can see, a weapon being polished in the dark under the guise of classroom discipline. The pattern interrupt arrives subtly. For the first time, the twins begin to notice that adults speak of Harry and Iris as if they are opposing political parties rather than siblings. Dumbledore invests his dwindling trust in Harry's moral core. McGonagall quietly favors Iris's capacity for calculated restraint. The Ministry courts whichever twin will stand beside the podium. The Death Eaters whisper about which one the prophecy truly meant. With 2 Potters on the board, no one can afford neutrality. Every adult must decide which child they will protect, which they will weaponize, and, if the war demands it, which they will quietly allow to fall. The next section will follow the moment the twins finally realize this, and begin, for the first time, to choose each other over every banner raised in their name. Voldemort's new obsession, turning the forgotten Potter. The wizarding world tells itself that Voldemort is obsessed with one boy, one scar, one prophecy. They are wrong. The moment there are 2 Potters on the board, his fixation fractures and then reforms around a far more ambitious design. The revelation does not arrive in a single flash of insight. It accretes, like frost on stone. In this timeline, the diary is not merely a weapon slipped into a schoolgirl's cauldron, but a probe, a Horcrux with questions. When the resurrected riddle in the chamber tastes Iris Potter's magic, its familiar echo of Harry, its warped soul resonance, he reports back along the dark tether. Later, in the graveyard, when Voldemort's wand meets Harry's and Priory Incantatum drags Lily's shade from green fire, he watches her eyes flick, not to her son, but to the empty air where a daughter should have stood. The discrepancy lodges like a splinter. He pulls at it with legilimency. Captured Order members, broken Death Eaters, even the trembling memories of Ministry clerks, all carry fragments, whispered references to the Potter girl, Dumbledore's sealed files, a second child who vanished into the administrative fog after Halloween 1981. Methodical certainty replaces wounded pride. Dumbledore did not simply defeat him. He edited the board. He hid a masterpiece to be molded. From that point, the strategy shifts. Harry becomes a problem to be solved with brutal efficiency. Break him, isolate him, and, when his usefulness as bait and symbol is exhausted, kill him. Iris, by contrast, is reclassified, not as an enemy to be obliterated, but as a hypothesis. Could love be inverted? Loyalty rescripted? Prophecy hacked? If the chosen one is a weapon being polished in the dark by Dumbledore, then Iris will be Voldemort's counter-experiment, a mirror held up to fate. To do this, he requires a mechanism. Drawing on the diary's architecture, he forges a derivative Horcrux, attenuated, almost delicate, keyed not to blood alone, but to the twin resonance between Harry and Iris, hidden within an innocuous heirloom that passes through Hogwarts' careless hands. It drinks in the emotional spikes that ripple between the siblings. Terror in the Forbidden Forest. Incandescent rage at Umbridge's quill, the hollow silence after Sirius falls. Each surge gives him a foothold. Dreams become porous. Visions bloom like bruises. Sometimes, Iris sees Harry's perspective. Sometimes, with surgical precision, he lets her see his. The temporal consequences are immediate. Armed with early intelligence and no longer inclined to underestimate schoolchildren, Voldemort accelerates the Second Wizarding War by a full year. Attacks are cleaner, tactically lethal, aimed at severing Iris from every competing authority. Weasley warmth targeted. Order safe houses compromised. Dumbledore's influence undermined by forged glimpses of his plans for her expendability. Hogwarts, once a fortress of neutrality, becomes a pressure chamber where Iris is never sure whose voice is in her head. In the mythic language that begins to cling to them, Harry is the scarred champion, the public adversary, the serpent's declared prey. Iris is something stranger, the mirror the serpent coils around, testing its own reflection. Predator and apprentice, Dark Lord and almost disciple. Each encounter, whether in dreams or corridors, is a negotiation over narrative itself. Who is chosen? Who is spare? Who dares to rewrite the story they were born into? The tragedy and the opportunity is that Iris starts to answer back. The next phase of this Slytherin timeline will follow the first time she consciously uses that tether against him, and discovers that, when you stare down a serpent through a mirror, it may not be clear which side is doing the charming. The Year of Fracture. Order of the Phoenix with a divided house. The first real fracture in this Slytherin timeline is not cast by Dumbledore's silence, where Harry reads the headmaster's distance as tactical, an infuriating, inscrutable move in a larger war he assumes must exist. Iris reads it as confirmation of her worst private thesis, that she is an error in the narrative, a liability Dumbledore regrets allowing to live. Every averted gaze in the corridor, every meeting where Harry is summoned and she is not, calcifies into methodical certainty. She is not a masterpiece to be molded. She is collateral being managed. In this timeline, the whispers arrive early, not as visions, but as impressions riding the edges of her soul resonance with Harry. A presence that lingers too long when she dreams near him, a cold, amused curiosity when she touches the scar he refuses to acknowledge. When Dumbledore withdraws, the dark does not. Voldemort's attention is a poison that feels treacherously like being seen. Hogwarts under Umbridge becomes a fortress turned inward, a school repurposed into a surveillance grid. For Harry, the answer is resistance. Dumbledore's army, clandestine training, a refusal to let the war stall just because the Ministry insists it does not exist. For Iris, in Slytherin Green, the calculus is uglier. Her house is crawling with informants. Her prefects attend Umbridge's tea parties. Her mere presence in the room of requirement would halve the DA's operational security. She knows this with tactically lethal clarity and stays away. Harry does not see the equation. He sees absence. He watches her walk with Slytherins who mock his detentions, hears her measured voice in the common room arguing that perhaps the Ministry has reasons to doubt Dumbledore, and the old cupboard-bred terror of abandonment curdles into rage. The argument detonates in an empty classroom after a DA meeting she misses. Harry accuses first, because that is easier than asking. He calls her a coward, a Slytherin appeaser, a weapon being polished in the dark by whichever side looks safer this week. Iris laughs once, without humour, and fires back that he is still the boy who will follow Dumbledore into any abyss so long as it is labelled for the greater good. She names the 15 years of lies, the hidden prophecy, the way one man split them like experimental variables, and never apologized. "They are wrong about you," she says, voice shaking, "but you are wrong about him." The Ministry trap sharpens this divide into a test. Voldemort does not merely bait Harry with a vision of Sirius. He threads it through Iris's connection to her twin, amplifying every shared memory of the man who treated them like inconvenient but beloved strays. The message is double-coded. Harry sees a godfather in mortal peril. Iris feels, beneath the panic, an invitation. Come and save him, or come and see what you might be. In the Department of Mysteries, the choice is not abstract. When the Death Eaters encircle them, several wands pivot toward Iris with unmistakable deference, an unspoken offer of safe passage. For a heartbeat, she hesitates, not because she wants their world, but because she is no longer certain Harry's world has room for her, except as a risk to be managed. She chooses anyway. She chooses her brother, hurling curses with a precision that startles even the Order when they arrive. It is not enough to save Sirius from the Veil. It is enough to ensure that when Harry collapses afterward, screaming blame at himself, Iris is there to redirect the trajectory of that guilt. She does not forgive Dumbledore in the hospital wing when he finally speaks. Harry hears the prophecy as a personal sentence. Iris hears it as an indictment of every adult who knew there might be two children in its shadow and chose one to carry the word chosen. The revelation does not bind them together. It lands between their beds like shrapnel, defining two incompatible readings of the same war. The year ends not with unity, but with a ceasefire. Harry blames himself. Iris blames Dumbledore. And somewhere in the alpine quiet of Voldemort's mind, a new calculation begins. The Potter girl came to her brother's side this time. But the next move in this timeline will ask what happens when saving him and defying him are no longer the same act. Horcruxes, Hallows, and a shared death sentence. Horcruxes and Hallows do not enter as abstractions in this timeline. They arrive as a medical chart for a shared terminal diagnosis. When Dumbledore finally lays out the truth in his high, book-lined office, that a fragment of Voldemort lives in Harry, he believes, with the calm cruelty of academic certainty, that he is describing a singular anomaly. They are wrong. Because Halloween 1981 did not produce one vessel. It produced a fracture pattern, the killing curse. Colliding with Lily's sacrificial magic and the twin resonance of two infants screaming in the same crib did not choose with perfect precision. It sheared, split, and smeared its way across two souls. Harry carries the dense core of the Horcrux, the obvious scar, the parcel tongue. Iris carries the echo, a weaker, more insidious soul resonance, a tendency to feel cold in rooms where Voldemort's name is spoken, dreams that are not hers, but never quite coalesce into images. Dumbledore tries at first to treat her as margin of error, a tragic corollary. Harry hears, "You must die so Voldemort can fall." Iris hears the silence that follows and understands its implication. There is no line in his methodical certainty for the girl who shares the prophecy's birth date and the Dark Lord's attention. The tension breaks only when she interrupts their carefully staged Horcrux strategy conference. Iris does not knock. She slams the door, drops a stack of her own notes, dates of visions, overlapping headaches, the way her magic spikes when Harry's scar burns, onto Dumbledore's desk. Any plan that treats Harry as the only variable, she argues, is not merely incomplete, it is tactically lethal to her. If his death is the key and she is tethered to the same curse logic, what happens to the spare Potter when the primary vessel is destroyed? Horcruxes lead almost inevitably to Hallows. Harry is drawn to the cloak with an almost gravitational pull. It is his inheritance, his refuge, the one artifact that feels like protection rather than manipulation. When he hears the legend of the Elder Wand, it slots neatly into his Slytherin timeline calculus, a weapon being polished in the dark, an instrument of final authority. Iris, by contrast, locks onto the Resurrection Stone, not as a morbid trinket, but as a hypothesis. If death is the axis of the prophecy, then speaking to the dead, Lily, James, even the shade of Voldemort before he broke himself, might reveal the loophole Dumbledore refuses to promise exists. Here the prophecy mutates from riddle to moral indictment. Neither can live while the other survives. Has always been read as Harry versus Voldemort. In this timeline, the twins are forced to ask whether the grammar is broader and more cruel. If the Potter line itself is the fulcrum, does the magic demand a sacrifice of one sibling for the other? Or can a curse written for singularity be broken by coordinated defiance? The pattern interrupt arrives in a whisper, not a revelation. Late one night, tracing the Hallows symbol over and over, Iris articulates the thought both have circled but never named. What if the only way to end this is not for one Potter to walk into the forest alone, but for both to step into death together, and then decide, together, whether to come back? Not martyrdom, mutual descent. A masterpiece to be moulded out of the very magic meant to erase them. Harry files it away like a forbidden strategy, too terrible to discard, too powerful to ignore. The war is no longer about who dies for whom. It becomes a question of who chooses the terms of their own ending, and whether the Hallows will recognize two hands when history only anticipated one. The final war, twice fought, Hogwarts under two shadows. Hogwarts does not fall in a single night in this timeline. It fractures along twin fault lines, each one shaped like a Potter. The world believes the final war is a simple clash of light and dark, prophecy and snake. They are wrong. The castle stands as a besieged fortress, ringed in cold fire and giant silhouettes. But the true war runs through stairwells and secret passages. Harry moves through them with methodical certainty, a tactically lethal shadow flanked by Neville, Hermione, and a hardened DA that now includes veterans of earlier skirmishes. His battlefield is the familiar, the room of requirement turned command center, the shattered bridge, the great hall where he repositions defenders like chess pieces. Iris's battlefield is the forbidden Slytherin corridors, hidden antechambers, the dungeons where Death Eater sympathizers thought they held uncontested authority and instead find a quiet, smiling mutiny. Because Iris never left Slytherin. She has been a weapon being polished in the dark, cultivated under Snape's double gaze and Voldemort's intermittent curiosity. And now she turns that cultivation inward. While Harry organizes shield lines on the ramparts, she orchestrates evacuations through the very passages the Carrows use, sliding terrified first years and stunned Muggle-borns past patrols with passwords she should not know. Her resistance cell sabotages wardstones, misdirects reinforcements, and feeds Harry live intelligence through enchanted mirrors. 2 fronts, 1 castle. Voldemort adapts. His strategy mutates around his twin obsession. At midnight, amplified through the enchanted sky, his voice lays out not 1 ultimatum, but 2. Iris Potter may step forward, be forgiven, and claim a throne at his side if she delivers her brother. Harry Potter may walk into the forest and surrender Iris in exchange for the lives of everyone inside the walls. Mercy as a weapon, family as leverage. It is a masterpiece of psychological siegecraft. And for a moment, even hardened fighters hesitate, glancing at the 2 faces the war now orbits. The classic duels still ignite, but their emotional gravity bends around the twins. Molly's confrontation with Bellatrix erupts in the courtyard while both Potters are present. Harry dragging wounded back toward cover, Iris emerging from a side door with Slytherin refugees in tow. Bellatrix, in this Slytherin timeline, fixates not on Ginny, but on the stolen daughter of Lily, shrieking promises of a purer apprenticeship. When Molly's curse lands, it is Iris who screams, seeing the last living link to her own years as a masterpiece to be molded collapse in a flare of green and red. Harry watches both women fall, mentor and matriarch, and understands that no victory here will be clean. Snape's end is likewise doubled. Cornered in the shrieking shack, he forces his memories not into 1 vial, but 2, pressing blood-slick fingers to Iris's temple, as well as Harry's. The pensieve later does not show them separate truths. It shows a single unbearable tapestry, Dumbledore weighing 2 infants against a sentence, reconfiguring the prophecy around either Potter while calculating which death would buy him more time. Soul resonance becomes a logistical variable. The twins emerge from that vision not united in simple rage, but in a colder comprehension of the war they inherited. And Hogwarts itself responds. The ancient protective magic, tuned to founders and bloodlines, twists around the divided prophecy like metal around a magnet. Wards flare where the twins stand back to back. Corridors reshape to carry Iris's evacuees faster when Harry silently wills them safe. Suits of armor move with uncanny synchronicity when both Potters command in the same breath. When they disagree, when Harry orders a last stand and Iris whispers retreat, the castle stutters. Staircases freezing mid-swing, doors refusing to decide which way to open. The fortress is listening, but it cannot choose between 2 rightful anchors. That paralysis is what finally pushes Harry toward the forest. He has seen the numbers, heard the screams, watched the magic itself hesitate. As long as 2 Potters exist under these skies, the prophecy's resonance keeps the war in a suspended, escalating stalemate. So he reframes the Hallows not as an escape, but as an accounting. If one death can free the other from a life lived as collateral, then the only tactically honest move is sacrifice. He does not walk into the trees for the world in some abstract, mobile blur. He walks so that Iris can someday enter a room without every wand twitching to see which twin she chose to be. He walks so Hogwarts can settle on one memory of the Potters that is not permanent siege. But the forest has its own memory of twin blood, and the Deathly Hallows were never designed to weigh two lives against one Dark Lord. When Harry steps beneath the branches, intending to end the war on his terms, the magic waiting for him does not behave according to anyone's methodical certainty. Not even death's. 2 steps into death, redefining the forest and the King's Cross. The forest does not greet him as a martyr. It studies him as if reassessing a weapon being polished in the dark, one that has learned to question the hand that forged it. In this timeline, Harry walks beneath the branches with a colder calculus than canon ever allowed. He knows the Horcrux in his chest must die. He knows Voldemort must fire the killing curse. And he knows that even if his heart stops, the war may not end while Iris remains bound to a prophecy that never learned to count properly. He is not walking to die for the world. He is walking to negotiate with the architecture of fate on behalf of both Potters. The resurrection stone turns in his fingers like a coin being weighed before a dangerous wager. James and Lily appear, yes, but the absence beside them is the loudest presence. There is no Iris-shaped ghost, because Iris is not dead, and the magic here cannot simulate a soul resonance still anchored to the living world. Harry understands the implication with methodical certainty. Death is not expecting one sacrifice. It is expecting one name. He gives Voldemort what the Dark Lord thinks he wants: green light, impact, silence. King's Cross arrives as a bleached-out inversion of Hogwarts, a fortress made of light and echo instead of stone and shadow. Harry, who has spent years being told he is a masterpiece to be molded by competing authorities, finally stands in a place where no one can physically reach him. And of course, Dumbledore is already waiting, as if even Limbo is just another chessboard the old man prepared in advance. The conversation begins with familiar notes: the Hollows, the choice to go back. But in the Slytherin timeline, Harry does not let it stay there. He asks the question no one ever wanted him to have the language for. Why was Iris sent away? Why were their lives split like assets in a portfolio? Why was one Potter paraded and the other buried in administrative fog and blood wards? Dumbledore answers with that terrible, gentle honesty that feels like confession and control in the same breath. Iris, he admits, was a problem he tried to solve by separation. 2 candidates for one prophecy meant volatility. So he constructed parallel cages, an alpine warded childhood for one version in his original design, a Muggle fortress of neglect for the other, until war logistics and human failure scrambled even his plan. They are wrong, he says of the world's narrative, but he was willing to let them stay wrong if it kept the pieces predictable. Then the script breaks. Harry is offered the classic choice: return alone and fulfill the lone hero arc, or go on and let the story calcify around his grave. Instead, he reaches sideways, not forward, pulling on the twin resonance that has hummed at the edge of his magic since childhood. Shared nightmares, synchronized bursts of accidental power, those moments when Iris bled in the hospital wing and his scar burned in answer. The air shivers. The station flickers. Iris does not fully appear so much as imprint. A second set of footprints, a voice overlapping his, a sense of another mind braced against the same impossible decision. Together, they examine the prophecy like a legal contract and reject its framing. They will not permit a world where one twin is anointed and the other collateral. They will both live and dismantle the story, or they will both die and deny it an ending. When Harry chooses to return, it is no longer to kill a man. It is to kill a hierarchy of worth that began the night someone decided only one child could matter. The victory over Voldemort, when it comes, will be measured not just in a corpse on the floor, but in the existence of two living Potters who refused to let prophecy, headmaster or Dark Lord, dictate which heartbeat the world was allowed to keep. After the war, two Potters in a world built for one. Victory, when it finally hardens into history, demands a narrator. The Ministry discovers, with a kind of bureaucratic horror, that their favorite story, one boy, one curse, one clean arc of destiny, is now unusable. For years, every poster, every hushed classroom anecdote, every carefully leaked prophet column has been built around a single silhouette, the boy who lived as lone axis of the wizarding world. In this timeline, the existence of Iris is not just an addendum. It is an indictment. To acknowledge her is to admit that the state knowingly erased a child. That strategic secrecy was a polite phrase for a weapon being polished in the dark, while her brother was paraded as a masterpiece to be molded in public. So the Ministry tries to split the difference. Official pamphlets speak of the Potters in the abstract, but ceremonies still place Harry at the center and Iris one step to the left, as if choreography could overwrite soul resonance. Revisionist portraits appear. Dumbledore with both infants in his arms, Fudge looking paternal in scenes that never occurred. Headlines that insist the plan was always to protect two. They are wrong. The archives and the scars refuse to cooperate. The public reaction fractures along older fault lines. For many, especially those who watched two small figures walk out of the final battle alive, the twins become dual saviors, mirrored saints whose survival proves that blood and choice can both defy death. But the Slytherin timeline has left its mark on perception. Iris's green and silver history makes her a convenient vessel for anxiety. In back rooms of Diagon Alley, people mutter that she provoked escalations, that Voldemort rose faster because there were two targets glowing in prophecy's crosshairs. Conspiracy theorists publish painstaking charts arguing over which Potter really killed Voldemort, as if the angle of a wand in a ruined courtyard can be reconstructed like a Quidditch foul. Harry and Iris attempt, with varying degrees of sincerity, to step sideways out of legend. Harry flirts with oral training, then walks away when he realizes the office intends to turn his instincts into curriculum without ever interrogating why a teenager learned to think like a field commander. Iris spends a year helping to rebuild Hogwarts' shattered wards, then insists on teaching a Muggle studies course that quietly dismantles the old, patronizing syllabus from within. Both of them move through careers and relationships with the same awareness. They were almost weapons instead of people, and the world has not entirely stopped reaching for the trigger. Over all of this hovers Dumbledore's legacy like a half-collapsed fortress. With his secrets dragged into daylight, the choice to separate siblings, the decision to let one child rot in a cupboard while the other was hidden in layers of Order silence. The wizarding world is forced into an uncomfortable binary. Some insist on sanctifying him as a flawed savior, the only mind brilliant enough to navigate a war of Horcruxes and prophecy. Others argue, with methodical certainty, that intellect does not excuse gambling with children's souls. The argument is not academic. It shapes new laws about guardianship, prophecy, and the limits of headmaster authority. And beneath the speeches and statues, the thematic axis tilts. This is no longer a narrative about fate selecting a single hero and everyone else orbiting his gravity. It is about two siblings who, again and again, decline the script. They refuse to owe the world their entire lives simply because a sentence in a dusty orb could be stretched to fit 2 July birthdays. When the next crisis stirs, and it will, the real question is not which Potter will rise, but how far they are willing to go to ensure that no one ever has to stand alone in that role again. Who would Harry be with a sister? Personality, morality, and choice. If canon insists that Harry's defining trait is his willingness to walk into death alone, they are wrong in this timeline. The defining image is not a solitary boy in a forest, but a brother, calculating with brutal clarity whether the world is worth Iris's life. His self-sacrifice does not vanish. It acquires a center of gravity, a soul resonance that makes every noble impulse more dangerous and more precise. From the cupboard years onward, Harry's instinct is still to put himself between pain and other people, but the presence of a smaller body huddled beside him alters the equation. He is no longer simply enduring. He is triaging. When Dudley swings, Harry learns to draw fire toward himself, not out of abstract heroism, but because Iris's flinch is intolerable. That pattern hardens into adulthood. The boy who, in canon, charges after the Philosopher's Stone because someone has to, now measures every risk against one question. If I fail, what happens to her? The same courage, but wrapped in methodical certainty. This tension fractures his recklessness. On some nights he becomes more cautious, refusing midnight corridors and half-baked plans because leaving Iris asleep in Gryffindor Tower while he dies beneath the school is a cost he will not pay. On others, he becomes even more tactically lethal, inserting himself into danger with almost reckless speed, precisely to ensure she never has to stand in the doorway of the chamber, or the graveyard, or the forest. The war drags him toward martyrdom. Iris drags him back toward survival. He lives in the pull between the two. Friendship in this configuration is filtered through that first loyalty. Ron still becomes a brother, but he is never the only one. His insecurity about second place now has a visible reference point in the girl who has always been first. Some conflicts soften. Harry does not cling to Ron in Goblet with the desperation of someone who has no other anchor, but others sharpen, especially when Ron's jealousy endangers Iris, even unintentionally. Hermione, meanwhile, finds in Iris a corroborating witness. When she says a plan is irrational, she is not merely nagging Harry, she is protecting his sister. The Golden Trio becomes a four-pointed structure, and Harry's authority within it is less about charisma and more about the quiet, unarguable fact that he will be the one to die first if it comes to that. Dumbledore's manipulations cut deeper. In canon, the revelation of calculated secrecy wounds Harry as a student. Here, it wounds him as a guardian. To learn that the man who positioned him as a weapon being polished in the dark also gambled with Iris's safety accelerates Harry's disillusionment. The Slytherin timeline showed us a boy who learns to distrust institutions early. In this timeline, that same skepticism blooms not from ambition, but from violated familial trust. Authority is no longer disappointing. It is dangerous. Yet beneath all these altered vectors, Harry remains recognizably himself. Brave, stubborn, disarmingly compassionate, still the child who will argue with a god of death about the value of a single life. The difference is that his story is no longer framed as a lone fortress against the dark, but as a fragile household trying not to be consumed by a world at war. The boy who lived is still willing to die. The brother is determined that, this time, the word Potter will not end with him, and that determination will shape every strategic choice we examine next. Who is the sister? Archetypes, variants, and your version. To understand how that determination reshapes the war, we have to answer a deceptively simple question. Who is the sister the world forgot to factor into its prophecy math? The wizarding world assumes Potter is a singular noun. In this timeline, they are wrong. The shape of the war bends around which version of her you choose to exist. The first archetype is the secret twin in Slytherin, the mirror Harry never knew he had, raised under the same alpine tutelage as our Bellatrix-forged strategist. She is not a side character. She is a parallel weapon being polished in the dark. Sorted into Slytherin beside him, she destabilizes the house from within, not as a follower, but as a rival claimant to underground authority. This twin is the one most likely to flirt with Voldemort's camp, not out of devotion, but out of ideological divergence. If Harry seeks order through calculated tyranny, she might argue that only open war can cauterize the world's rot. Their soul resonance makes them terrifying together and catastrophic apart, because every strategic strength he has, she can anticipate and counter. The second archetype is the younger sister who grows up in the Dursleys' cramped, airless fortress of petty cruelty. She shares his cupboard, his hand-me-downs, his silent meals. Here, the timeline shifts from solitary endurance to a micro-family under siege. A younger sister emphasizes protection and innocence. Harry's anger becomes less about his own suffering and more about shielding the only person smaller than he is. This version is least likely to join Voldemort, but she is the one who challenges Dumbledore most directly, because every withheld truth, every calculated sacrifice, now endangers a child Harry has sworn to keep alive. She doesn't fracture the Golden Trio by romance or rivalry so much as by gravity. Ron and Hermione must decide whether their loyalty is to Harry's mission or to the fragile younger Potter who keeps almost dying for it. The third archetype is the older sister taken by the Order, hardened into a warrior before Harry even knows she exists. While he is being sculpted as a masterpiece to be molded in Slytherin, she is learning to kill in the shadows. For Dumbledore, when they finally converge, she brings rivalry and role reversal. She was the chosen one before he ever held a wand, and she has the scars to prove it. This is the sister most likely to destabilize the Golden Trio from within, because she questions their every assumption about Harry's leadership and moral compass. She is also the one who might, with methodical certainty, decide that Voldemort is not the only tyrant who needs to fall. Each archetype shifts the thematic resonance, twins, foreground identity, and interchangeability. If one dies in the forest, does the prophecy still stand? A younger sister highlights the cost of protection. Every emotional support she offers is a new hostage the war can take. An older sister amplifies power and its moral risks. She is already killed in the dark, and she may not be willing to stop when the Dark Lord does. So if you were writing this Slytherin timeline, which sister would you choose? And where would you test her first? The sorting, with two Potters facing divergent houses. The graveyard, with a sibling forced to watch the ritual. Or the forest, where I am ready to die becomes we decide who dies. The next moves in this analysis will assume one version, but the real power of this exercise is that any of them could be true. Breaking the prophecy, why this what if changes everything. In the end, every divergence we have traced spirals back to a single quiet heresy against canon. The boy who lived was never alone. The world of the books assumes his isolation as a fixed law of magic and narrative. They are wrong. From the moment two cries rose over Godric's Hollow, this timeline fractures the myth. Harry is no longer a solitary vessel for destiny, but one half of a charged soul resonance, two Potters marked by the same war, the same prophecy, and the same refusal to be reduced to an equation scrawled in a seer's trance. What follows is not a hero's journey, but a duet under siege. We watched that duet in miniature in the cupboard years, where the presence of a sister turns Privet Drive from a solitary oubliette into a cramped, embattled fortress. In canon, the Dursleys' cruelty presses inward on a single child. Here, every withheld letter, every locked door is filtered through the calculus of, do I take the blow? Or does she? That simple redistribution of pain produces a different Harry less dazzled by rescue, more disciplined, more willing to weaponize his own suffering if it means she walks away whole. Hogwarts in this timeline becomes the stage where that shared calculus collides with the house system's fault lines. Two Potters, split between Gryffindor courage and Slytherin caution, drag into the open what the series usually keeps submerged: that the Sorting Hat is not merely a whimsical rite, but an instrument that can bisect a family to preserve an institution. The Golden Trio either expands or fractures around this new axis. Snape's loathing and Dumbledore's long game are both forced to account for a second variable the prophecy never named. And that is the thematic pivot. Fate versus choice is no longer an individual sport. It becomes a family argument. Who carries the prophecy when both qualify? Who is allowed to be reckless? And who is ordered to survive? The Chamber of Secrets becomes a test of whose life is negotiable. The prophecy reveal turns into an indictment of every adult who gambled on which child mattered more. The forest walk ceases to be a lone martyrdom and becomes a negotiation at the edge of death. Two siblings deciding with methodical certainty how much of themselves they are willing to spend to end the war. By inserting a sister, the narrative drags hidden fractures into the light. Dumbledore's manipulations look less like tragic necessity and more like a headmaster calmly apportioning risk across a family line. The Ministry's propaganda machine, so eager for a single emblematic savior, now has to choose which Potter to put on the posters and which to erase. The house system's quiet cruelty is exposed when siblings are weaponized against one another by colors and common rooms. Even the wizarding world's hunger for simple myths is indicted. It cannot tolerate two equally plausible chosen ones, so it will try to compress them into one legend and one casualty. So, this is where the exercise turns back on you. Which moment in canon, refracted through a sister's presence, feels most destabilized to you? The basilisk's lair, the shattering orb in the Department of Mysteries, or the forest where I am ready to die becomes we decide who dies and when. Which version of the Potters do you believe in? The lone sacrificial lamb or the tactically lethal pair who refuse to let prophecy dictate which of them is expendable? Hold that image as we close. Not a single boy framed by steam on platform 9 3/4, but two Potters moving in lockstep through the white haze, bearing scars the prophecy did not predict, claiming a future no seer successfully mapped. The world will still call one of them the chosen one. They are wrong. The real question, the one this channel will keep pressing, is whether you are willing to choose the messier, more dangerous version of the story, and what that choice reveals about the kind of magic and the kind of power you actually want to be true.